The room doesn't have to be a lifeless container. It
Hmm.
can be an active participant in everything we do. And pretty quickly, we're getting to that point.
Welcome to Work Better, a Steelcase podcast where we think about work and ways to make it better. I'm your host, Chris Congdon, and no other business driver is moving faster than AI, so it's critical we understand it and ensure that our workplaces are ready. The implications won't just change how we work, but where we work as well. My guest today is Microsoft's Mike Pell. And earlier in his career, Mike actually created the PDF. Like, can you imagine life without a PDF? But today he leads the Microsoft Garage in New York City, which is focused on collaboration, creativity, and experimentation. And he works on projects like the future of Microsoft's Copilot, their AI tool, and how ambient computing will change the way that we meet at work. Mike has a front row seat to the future of work, and he says AI will be integrated in almost everything we do. He also says that ambient computing is going to move our conference rooms from being kind of lifeless containers to actually participating in meetings. Here's my conversation with Mike. Welcome to Work Better, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
So, Mike, I don't know if all of our listeners know this, but you've had a very long and a fascinating career. I'm going to be a little vulnerable because I haven't had this before. I've talked to a guest before, but I actually, as I was preparing, I thought to myself, like, am I smart enough to talk to this guy? like, like I kind of had that feeling of like, wow, there's some really interesting things that you've done. So before we jump into kind of where we are today, I've got to go back a little bit and go like, did you really invent the PDF?
I really did. It's a true story. Hacked it together in an afternoon.
Wow.
So yeah, it's funny. Way back when John Warnock was running Adobe, and he
Uh-huh.
crazy idea to be able to share documents between different types of computer systems, which at that time was kind of impossible. I mean, you could send things around, but they never looked right. And so John, being the visionary and technologist he was, just wanted to put together a really quick example of how this could be done and asked a very small team of us at Adobe to go off and create a prototype. And so my part was to do a mock-up of the rendering, but also to create this first demo of a format that could be used to send documents across the Mac and the PC and then Linux machines back then. So yes, it's a true story.
Wow. It's so hard to like even remember what it was like before we had a PDF.
Yeah.
It just feels like it's become so ingrained in the ways that we're working today, even though there's so much that's changing, and I want to get to that too. Um, so you've been at Microsoft for some time and leading Microsoft's Garage. And I want to talk more about that because like when we think about Microsoft, we may not put the word garage together with Microsoft as much as some other things. But I also heard another thing about you is that you invented a time machine. And I'm just wondering if your invention of a time machine ties to your work at Microsoft.
Well, so in the most recent book I wrote called Visualizing Business, I go on to describe how AI and data and spatial computing can be combined to create essentially a time machine for business, being able to rewind through existing data or fast forward using simulation and forecasting to be able to see outcomes of things. So yes, that was a lot of fun to do, and a lot of my work with data visualization is really about helping people to communicate and understand more deeply. So that was a very fun project to do that. And I got to do a TEDx talk recently where I went through this whole scenario of taking people on the time machine. So that was a lot of fun.
Well, that is very cool. Nobody should worry that we're going to all of a sudden, get transported back into the 1800s or something.
Well,
But it is really interesting to think about how more current developments are allowing us to be able to go back and understand maybe the trajectory of where we're going based on where we've been. So let's go back to the garage a little bit. Can you tell us what is Microsoft's Garage and what do you do?
Microsoft Garage is our worldwide innovation program where employees get to take their ideas and their passion and do something with them. It's kind of a unique program in corporate America in that we literally encourage our employees to take their ideas and figure out how to make them into a working prototype of some sort, to share them, to see is there something there. We run the world's biggest hackathon every year for the last 10 years. We had 74,000 Microsoft employees join us last year where they got to form teams or, join a team that had sort of like-minded people to figure out is something possible. And we get projects from across the board, every different area, whether it's sustainability, working with health, of course, the technology side. But it's just amazing that the Garage program helps to sort of support all of the passion that our employees have for experimenting and being curious. And by the way, the term garage, as you mentioned, is sort of homage to the Silicon Valley garages, right? Where some of our greatest,
Sure.
Innovative companies have come from, like HP and Apple.
Yeah. Well, it sounds so cool. And I would love to know a little more. Like, are there any projects that you worked on through the hackathon or through your ongoing work in the garage that you think are really pretty interesting?
There's lots. If you go to Microsoft.com/garage, there's a tab called the Wall of Fame. And the Wall of Fame shows many of the projects that have come out of hackathons that have actually made it into Microsoft's product and service catalog that have, gone on to help people in lots of different areas. There's projects that have gone on to help people in the areas of learning and reading, in the areas of farming, being able to monitor what's happening at farm sites remotely using sensors and drones, projects that have gone on to help to be able to index video so that you can just ask, like now ask a question, when did Satya say this, this particular phrase?
Yeah.
We have so many different interesting projects across the board that happen every year, but many of them have made it back into Microsoft product and services.
So that's pretty cool. I'd like to get into the topic that it seems like everybody is asking about right now, thinking about, which of course is AI. And I'd really like to hear more what you're seeing and thinking about that in terms of, like, how do you think AI is going to transform kind of the landscape of innovation and creativity? I mean, it already is, but what are you seeing from your vantage point?
What we do in the garage, especially here in New York City, is I work with our customers to help them imagine how to leap forward. And this is the realm of many innovation programs, and this is not unique to Microsoft or what we do in the garage. But what we're doing is we're using Microsoft Copilot and AI to help accelerate very particular parts of the innovation process. So very well, brainstorming, envisioning, coming up with new ideas, researching competitive landscapes or figuring out how to go to market. Those things took a long time. There were very manually intensive tasks that groups of people had to be scheduled for and get together and this and that, and it would just take a while. As you know, everybody is being asked to innovate in some way, and the truth is you cannot innovate on demand. It just doesn't work.
Right.
But we found that you can accelerate the process by using Copilot, and in our case, in very particular parts to sort of speed up. So we can do an ideation session literally in minutes now, when that used to take hours or days. We can sort through ideas. We can actually ask for rationale as to why something might work or not work. How does this relate to other things that are already in the marketplace? The speed at which you can do this type of, I'll call it the front end of innovation, is astounding. And so that's really where we're seeing the biggest advances are in the realm of, when you apply AI to innovation. It's being applied across the board, of course, within our tool sets and the systems and the processes that we work already. But innovation-wise, it's been a game changer.
A few years ago, I didn't really think AI pertained to me so much because I'm like, well, I do creative work and that's not something that, I'm going to use AI for. And now here I am where Copilot has become, among other things, one of my favorite research assistants.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I can ask it to help me find things that I'm looking for and to be able to help sift through academic papers or different bodies of research in like seconds of things that would have taken me hours, days, weeks.
Who knows how long, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like I still might be, digging through all of that stuff. So I mean, I think the reality that a lot of us are coming to now is like this isn't something that's for somebody else. That it's really going to influence all the different ways that we're working. So to tie with that and the work that you're doing there in the garage, I know that you also spend a lot of time working with us at Steelcase as partners, thinking about kind of the physical experiences around technology, what those might be like. And I think that's a question that everybody has is like how might our physical experiences need to shift going forward? Or if we squint a little bit, what do you think the future might look like there?
Well, it's true. I've had a long, incredibly great working relationship with Steelcase, figuring out the work environment.
Mhm.
So here at the Microsoft Garage, there's many pieces of Steelcase, equipment and furniture here because it is for creative people. That's how I use it. That's been incredibly valuable to me to have it here to showcase different ways of approaching things. So here in the physical space, the garage that's here in New York was designed 6 years ago before the pandemic, but it was always intended to be a very open layout, highly flexible. And I designed the whole garage around surface and, believe it or not, Steelcase. We talked very, very early in the process about having something that you used to call louvers that are, I think, now called pivots.
Mhm.
They're pieces of vertical dividers that are one side writable whiteboard and the flip side acoustic dampening material. That helped me to subdivide the space without putting walls in. Super effective. I work with, of course, surface hubs.
Mhm.
The Steelcase Roam, lets me take the, and move the surface hubs all around the garage, which is super useful, which is an incredible part of the design. We needed things to be more flexible than they could have been in other environments. When you set up an office in a neighborhood, environment where there's sort of fixed desks or there's hard wall offices, it's a little difficult to get the right feel. But working with, these different pieces that can be mixed and matched and arranged in certain ways and then changed when needed unlocked something for us. What it gave us was the ability to do what we needed to do at that moment and then change it. And that for us has been critically important to moving things forward and not just having people feel like the spaces are set. Because
Yeah,
one thing we did learn coming out of the pandemic is that everything is different. The way that people approach
for
work,
sure.
their values, the way that the company has to operate, is quite different. And so having that flexibility of the physical space has been very important to us to be able to feel like we can work at our best.
That's so great to hear and so interesting. When I talk to the folks in our team that are really at Steelcase who are really focused on AI, one of the things that surprised me, I think, is we maybe had this perception that they'd all be sitting at individual desks with big screens and kind of glued to the screen all day. But they said, in fact, actually, they're spending a lot more time collaborating and interacting with each other because it's yes, you have to be able to visualize the data, but you also have to be able to discuss and understand and work with other people. Does that feel right to you?
Absolutely. I mean, I always say, half jokingly, if you want to focus, stay home,
Mm-hmm.
right? Don't come to work to lock yourself in a little phone booth. That's
Mm-hmm.
not what being at work is about. It's about collaborating with your teammates. It's about
Mm-hmm.
finding opportunities, to work in this shared environment in a way that you can't do from home or somewhere else. And so for us, we're always looking for those collaboration moments, right? Like how can we enable the best possible environment? I saw recently, I was at the Steelcase headquarters here in New York in Columbus Circle. Some of the amazing Teams work that you've done with both screens and the desks and the arrangement. Brilliant work of putting people in a half circle, looking at the screen.
Oh,
Rather
sure.
than the
Mm-hmm.
traditional like layout. It's so simple, but once you see it, you say, well, of course it should be that way, which is my definition of a true breakthrough. When something is so obvious that you can't imagine it being done any other way.
Right.
The other thing that we're getting to very quickly is the notion that's been described in the past as ambient computing, meaning, technology is built into the rooms, the desks, the chairs, the
Yeah.
screens, everything around us. And pretty quickly, we're getting to that point where you can walk in a room, it can recognize you, you can interact, you can join meetings very seamlessly, you can work with people that are not anywhere close to you, but you feel closer because of camera angles and the audio that's being, sort of done spatially. So we are getting very quickly to this feel that the technology, AI powered, is being deeply embedded into the physical, spaces and the physical objects that surround us to the point where it's enabling things that we haven't been able to do before.
I love that you're saying that because it feels like it's something that has been on kind of the wish list for a long time. Like we've imagined this future where the room could be more of a participant. Um, but yeah, we haven't quite gotten there.
Well, can I just comment on that, Chris? So in the pandemic, I think I told you about the Microsoft Global Hackathon. It's this amazing event we run every year.
Yeah.
So we had Steelcase join us several years ago as a participant in the hackathon. The project we worked on is exactly what you just said. We made the room be an active participant in the meeting to the point
Mm.
where the room was actually prompting people, sort of privately, like, "Hey, Mike, you haven't said anything in this meeting for a while. Are you paying attention? Are you tracking?" Maybe
Ah.
saying to someone like, "Hey, Chris, you've been talking a lot. Maybe you should ask Mike to say something."
Yeah. I could envision the room saying just that to me.
Right. It's the
Yeah.
notion that the room doesn't have to be a lifeless container. It
Mhm.
can be an active participant in everything we do.
So I don't know if this is a slightly different direction, but you have written a number of books. Your most recent one is called Visualizing Business. I think this is the one where I got a little nervous because you started talking about this concept of 4D visualization and, coming from a design business, like I understand 2D and 3D, but I didn't quite get 4D. Can you talk about that concept a little bit? What do you mean by that?
Sure. So we're all familiar with 2D. It's, the spreadsheets and the charts and the graphs and like all the business information that we see on our screens are essentially 2D, flat, static, lifeless information. You work in 3D because you're a spatial designer, you're a spatial thinker. You can understand the importance of spatialness in your work because you're helping to design environments where humans inhabit these spaces. So 3D, we all understand that 3D refers to a 3D object. Like I have my little coffee cup as a 3D object. 4D is simply the addition of time. So time has never been used as one of the principal aspects of our work. We all understand inherently that time is part of business. There are all the things that have come before and all the things that will come in the future. But when you look at a spreadsheet or a chart or a document of some kind, there's no time slider. Like if you're watching, Netflix or YouTube or some video, there's always a little slider to go. You can scrub backwards or you can fast forward. That should be part of everything that we do in business.
Mhm.
And it's boggled me for the last 20 years that we haven't incorporated time as a fundamental element into what we do with everything about business, whether it's processes or data or systems. So the book really talks about how we're going to build systems with time, the 4 and 4D being that addition.
That is so fascinating. And I highly recommend it to any of our listeners. Don't be intimidated. I think it really is an interesting concept that Mike is sharing. So, Mike, it feels like from where you're sitting, in my words, I would say you have like a front row seat to kind of the future of work. So, if you take that vantage point, like what advice might you offer to some of our listeners about what you see coming, how to prepare for it? What are some of the things that we should be thinking about now?
I love what you said earlier about Copilot being essentially a trusted teammate of yours. I think you said
Mhm.
it's like, a researcher that can you do things.
Yeah.
That is exactly the right attitude that people should have about how to integrate AI into their work lives, whether you're a highly creative designer, an engineer working in the medical profession, it doesn't really matter.
Hmm.
Name your favorite AI assistant can help you personally to do certain things. And the way that you do that is just by experimenting. Just try it out.
Sure.
I always tell people many people say, well, what course should I take to teach me how, to be great at AI? And I say, don't take any class. Just open it up and start talking to it like it's a person,
Hmm.
whether it's a friend or a coworker or an expert in some field that you need to know about. Just have a conversation. And that's my best advice for people who are, maybe a little hesitant to try it out or are trying it, but sort of feel like they have to learn how to be the world's greatest prompt engineer. You do not. You can literally just talk to these things. Now, that said, the more specific you are and the more detailed you are in your conversation or asks, the better output you're going to get.
Hmm.
So there is some practice involved in how you phrase things and to the level of detail that you want things to come out. That's great. I always advise companies who come in to talk about, different AI projects that they like to do, to not try to spin up some giant project right away. Think about what you really need to get done. And then, companies like Microsoft can certainly help you figure out how to do parts of it quickly so that you get those immediate wins. You get, see some productivity gains, efficiency gains, or growth in other areas. And so that's the other part of all this is it's easy to think about AI being a way to streamline and automate and make things more efficient. But the other side of the coin is that it is amazing to open up new possibilities for growth, whether it's personal growth, like learning a new skill set,
Right.
or growth in your business, maybe going into completely new areas where you didn't have an offering before or didn't have a service before.
Yeah.
So we like to look at both the operational efficiency side of things and the growth side of things as how to think about using AI going forward.
That's really helpful advice. And I would just build on that and say, for anybody who might feel a little bit intimidated, I first started my relationship with Copilot when I needed help writing my Christmas newsletter. And I was tired at night and I had writer's block. And I thought I was really impressed that it did a pretty good job. But I also was a little impressed with myself because I said, I thought I could never be a prompt engineer. But yet I was able to tell Copilot that I wanted to write it in a certain voice and a certain style, and voila. So that really helped me get past kind of my initial anxiety about all of that.
Yeah, and the fun thing is it does get better over time. As
Sure.
it learns more about how you like to work and the way that you like to do things, it will get better and better at helping. And I think people also get better and better at figuring out how to pose a more beautiful question, right? So that you get a better response.
Yeah. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today because now I feel a little silly saying that I felt nervous about talking to you, whether I was smart enough. You've been very gracious, and I feel like I've come away from the conversation learning a lot. So thanks for joining us today.
This is really fun. Can't wait to come back and talk more about what you're doing with Copilot.
Oh, absolutely. We'll be happy to share. Thanks, Mike.
75% of employees use AI at work. But is your workplace designed to support AI integration? Learn how AI is entering the workplace as an organizer, analyst, director, and coworker in a new Work Better magazine article. Discover more and get your free copy at steelcase.com/WB magazine.
Thanks for listening today. Join me next week when I talk to Dana Greenberg, who's an organizational psychologist and author. Dana's research is all about how people craft full, meaningful lives while navigating work, family, and their community. And here's a tip. She says when we have full lives outside of work, we actually perform better at work. Don't miss this really interesting conversation with Dana. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, would you share the episode with a friend or a colleague? And be sure to like us and visit us at steelcase.com/research to sign up for weekly updates or workplace research, insights, and design ideas delivered right to your inbox. Thanks again for being here, and we hope your day at work tomorrow is just a little bit better. Thanks to everyone who helps make Work Better podcast possible, including our producers Katie Pace, Rebecca Charbowski, Stab Contis, Chiara Licari, Brandon Lasik, and Celeste Johnson. Creative art direction is by Aaron Ellison and Emily Cowdrey. Our editing and sound mixing is by Soundpost Studios. Technical support is by Mark Caswell and Jose Jimenez, and our digital publishing is by Areli Ariano and Jordan Marks.